It was an ordinary weekday evening, and I found myself lacking an appetite as I sat down for supper. Across the table, my two sons, Ryan and Spencer, were devouring their macaroni and cheese with gusto. At 15 and 14 respectively, they never failed to clean their plates, fueled by their active lifestyles and typical teenage pursuits. My wife, Kara, occupied the far end of the table, ensuring that everyone had their fill of whatever they desired. The scene felt like something straight out of a Norman Rockwell painting. Once the boys finished their meal, they dashed outside for a game of street hockey before nightfall. I lingered over the last of my iced tea, gathering the courage to confront Kara, who was busy at the sink, washing dishes. Just as I rose from my chair, I blurted out, "The next time you meet your lover, maybe skip the red dress. You looked like a $20 hooker walking into that motel." She didn't respond. And as I exited the house, I heard the unmistakable sound of a plate shattering on the floor behind me. For the next couple of hours, I mowed the lawn. As dusk settled in, I reluctantly stopped. The last thing I wanted to do was return home and face Kara. I took my time cleaning the mower, even noticed it was low on oil, which I took care of. While tossing the empty oil container into the trash, I stumbled upon a tightly wadded brown paper bag buried at the bottom. Inside lay the red dress and a pair of red underwear. The panties were stained, but I had no intention of keeping them. I already knew who had been involved. That night, Kara was in bed with the door shut. I felt a strange relief. I had no desire to confront her further. The day had started off wrong, and for months I had sensed that something was amiss with Kara. I tried to dismiss the feeling, hoping it would pass, but it only intensified. My wife, a fourth-grade teacher, typically left for work around the same time as the boys. That morning, however, she took a sick day for a routine eye exam. I was a house painter, and I had been working on an apartment complex in Harrisburg, about an hour's drive from home. After hearing about her sick day, I decided to take one for myself, quietly staying home. I had been painting houses for nearly 20 years. I enjoyed the work and considered myself good at it, having supported Kara through college with my earnings. I once thought she appreciated my career choice, but over the last few years, her comments suggested otherwise. When she introduced me to her friends, she always avoided bringing up my job, and if the subject came up, you could easily see how uncomfortable she was. It was acceptable when I was funding her education and providing for our family, but now I felt like a burden. Kara was an excellent teacher, earning more than I did and enjoying better benefits. Her union health plan covered the entire family, and she was building a nice pension. Meanwhile, all I had to look forward to was Social Security. She kept herself fit and attractive, standing at only 5 feet 1 inch tall, but commanding attention with her short platinum hair. I found myself waiting a couple of blocks down from our house, watching for Kara to leave. When she finally emerged, she was wearing that pretty little red dress, an unusual choice for a trip to the doctor. She looked good in it, and I had always told her so. But the doctor certainly didn't have an office at the Sunset Inn. Kara parked her car and walked directly to room 304, knocked twice, and entered. That sight was all I needed to solidify my suspicions. The young desk clerk handed me the registration card without hesitation in exchange for a $100 bill. I recognized the name, Jefferson Carter, a familiar face from a few of the events Kara had dragged me to. I couldn't recall the details, but he was somehow connected to the school board or district. I noticed his car parked nearby, left unlocked. It took only a moment to retrieve the registration from the glove box. It was registered to Jefferson and Holly Carter, residing at 405 Clinton Drive in Lancaster. That rang a bell. I remembered he was indeed on the Lancaster County School Board and, to my dismay, married. That discovery marked the peak of my day. I wandered around aimlessly for several hours before heading home. When I arrived, Kara greeted me with her usual cheerfulness, although she wasn't wearing the red dress any longer. That night, I didn't sleep at home. Instead, I parked my truck behind the warehouse of the company I subcontracted for. Still sweaty from mowing, I didn't care. I desperately needed coffee. I ordered some eggs and toast to accompany it, trying to kill time before going back home. I wanted to be certain that Kara had left. There wasn't much in the house that I felt attached to. I stuffed all my clothes into a few trash bags and grabbed some important documents, my birth certificate, passport, and other essentials. Then, I made a quick phone call. "Holly Carter?" "Yes." "This is Felix Foster. We've crossed paths at a few school events over the years. I can't say I recall. What do you want?" I just thought you should know that your husband, Jefferson, spent yesterday afternoon at the Sunset Inn in Reading with my wife, Kara. There was nothing but silence on the other end of the line. I waited for her to say something, but no response came. That's all I needed to tell you, Mrs. Carter. I'm sorry for disturbing you, but I couldn't just let it slide. Goodbye. 10 minutes later, I was on the road, heading to Colorado to visit my Uncle Jared. Leaving the boys behind wasn't easy, but they were strong, and Kara could take better care of them than I could. She had the better income, and, aside from the infidelity, was the more capable parent. I didn't leave any notes or explanations behind. I figured Kara would figure things out once she saw my clothes were gone. The boys usually got home from school around 3 p.m., so, a little after, I called Ryan. His phone could only dial a few preset numbers, but incoming calls worked just fine for us. Hey Ryan, it's Dad. You on your way home? Yeah, why? I wanted to let you know I moved out today. I'm on my way to Colorado to stay with Uncle Jared for a while. I thought you and Spencer should hear it from me. What the hell, Dad? Why'd you move out? The short answer, Ryan, is to ask your mother. But that wouldn't really explain everything. Your mom seems to think I'm not good enough for her anymore. Maybe she's looking for someone with a better job or more status. I don't know. Either way, I'm giving her some time to sort things out. I'll call when I can, but Uncle Jared's place doesn't get much of a signal. Come on, Dad. Can't you work it out? What about counseling or something? Not for me, son. Look, your mom's got a good job, and she'll have no trouble taking care of you and Spencer. I'll try to call again this weekend. And please don't tell your mom where I am or that I reached out to you. Take care of Spencer and try to stay calm. I'll be in touch. Bye. Bye, Dad. I was just crossing into Illinois at that point. Uncle Jared lived just north of Raton Pass, in a spot that felt more like New Mexico than Colorado. I never really knew what he did for work or how he managed his finances, but he always seemed comfortable. Years ago, he'd caught his wife cheating and kicked her out. When I told him my situation, he understood completely and told me I was welcome to stay as long as I needed. He appreciated the company. Jared owned a good stretch of land, though it wasn't particularly useful for much, too rugged to farm and too barren to ranch. Aside from the main house, there were several barns and corrals. Jared had quite a few horses, which I later learned were all boarded for other people. Most folks came on weekends to ride, especially in the summer. The rest of the year, the place was pretty quiet. On Sunday afternoon, we drove into Trinidad to grab some dinner and pick up a few things I had forgotten to pack. When I got a signal on my phone, I called Ryan. Hey son, just wanted to let you know I made it here safely. How are things going on your end? Not great, Dad. I told Spencer everything, and he's furious with Mom. He's not even speaking to her. She won't explain why you left. She keeps claiming she has no idea. I've tried to get her to open up, but she just shuts down. Spencer and I are keeping our distance from her as much as we can. You seem to be handling things pretty well. I'm really sorry you've had to deal with this mess. Just do your best. I can't get cell service here at the ranch, but Jared's got a landline. I'll try calling from there. Is there anything I can do for you and Spencer? We'll be okay, Dad. One thing about Jared's place, it was clear that every single building needed a fresh coat of paint. I had no idea how long he'd lived there, but I'd bet money that a paintbrush hadn't touched the place in years. At least I found a way to pitch in. I went to a nearby co-op and bought all the 5-gallon buckets of red oxide paint they had in stock. On Jared's tab, of course. We still had a few months of good weather ahead, and I aimed to repaint most of the outbuildings before winter hit. The main house, however, would have to wait until spring. The next 2 weekends I couldn't get a hold of Ryan on his cell phone. It started to make me uneasy. Another couple of weeks went by, and still no word from the boys. It had been over a month without any contact. I thought I had given Ryan the number for Jared's landline, but now I wasn't so sure. Just as I was about to really start worrying, Jared called me over to the house phone. Dad, it's Ryan. Spencer and I are in Santa Fe. We need you to come pick us up. Can you get here? What? Santa Fe? How did you get there? I can't explain right now. I'm borrowing someone's phone, and they want me to keep this quick. We're at the Sky Blue terminal. How soon can you get here? Give me a couple of hours. Get something to eat while you wait. I'm on my way. 2 hours later, both boys were piled into the back seat of my truck, heading north with me. They had no bags. Spencer knocked out the second he sat down. I tried calling you several times, Ryan. What happened to your phone? Mom found out you were calling. She lost it, grabbed my phone, and smashed it with a rolling pin. I thought about calling the number you gave me for Jared's place, but I ended up waiting. I don't know why. maybe I just hoped things would get better. And I'm guessing, by the fact you're here, things didn't improve. No, not at all. About a month ago, Mom started going out at night. She wouldn't come home until after midnight, and she was always drunk. Some mornings, she wouldn't even get up for work, didn't bother calling in either. Was she going out alone? At first, yeah. But a week later, she started bringing guys home with her. They'd both be completely hammered. She'd take them straight to her room and, well, you can guess the kind of noise we had to listen to. I get it. How did you two handle that? The first time it happened, Spencer and I waited about an hour. Then we snuck outside and let the air out of the guy's tires. We stayed over at Mr. Price's house that night. He let us use his guest room. In the morning, we watched from his place as the guy realized all his tires were flat. He was furious. Took over an hour for AAA to come and fix it. Mom stood outside on the porch in her bathrobe, but we headed straight to school. She didn't say a word when we got home. Did this happen often? Just one more time. The next night, she brought another guy home, so we did the same thing. Except this time, we cut the valve stems. They had to tow his car away. He was livid. Mr. Price thought it was hilarious. After that, she stopped bringing guys to the house. Well, at least you stopped that part of it. Yeah, but she kept going out. Sometimes she'd come home in the morning on her own. Other times, someone would drop her off. I have no idea where she left her car. And one weird thing, every time she went out, she wore one of those red dresses. She must have bought 5 or 6 of them. At least Spencer and I were able to stay home and get some rest. We got a lot of calls from the school, though. The district wanted to know why she wasn't showing up for work. She slept most of the time when she was home. A couple of days ago, she was fired. Well, sort of. The union wouldn't let them officially fire her, but they've stopped her from going to work. I'm not sure about all the details. I'm really sorry, Ryan. If I'd known things were going to get this bad, I never would have left you both there. So, how did you two end up in Santa Fe? Last night, around midnight, some guy pulled up and shoved her out of his car with his foot. She stumbled up to the porch and just collapsed. We weren't sure if she was even alive. Her dress was ripped to shreds, and she looked awful. I told Spencer to call 911, then grabbed Mom's credit card from her wallet. I went online and booked 2 tickets from Philly to Santa Fe and had them held at the counter. I wasn't sure they'd give 2 kids tickets, though. I almost booked us for Denver, but changed it at the last second. Well, seems like it worked out all right. We had to fudge things a bit. What do you mean? When the EMTs got there, one of them immediately called the cops after seeing Mom. They asked if anyone else was home. By the time the cops showed up, Mom was being loaded into the ambulance. Turns out she had a mix of alcohol and cocaine in her system. I had no idea she was doing coke. Neither did I, son. They started asking a lot of questions, especially about the car that dropped her off, but we didn't know much. After a while, this lady cop from Family Services came over and started asking where you were. I told her you were in Colorado and had sent us tickets to come out there. I put on my saddest face and told her we had no way of getting to the airport without an adult. She made some calls and ended up driving us to the ticket counter herself. I guess it was the easiest option for her, and it worked out perfectly for us. Once the boys had settled in, Jared and I stayed up until midnight talking about the whole situation. I had figured that Kara would start divorce proceedings as soon as I left, but apparently I was wrong. Never in my wildest dreams did I expect her to spiral into this mess. I guess she had a lot of pent-up desires she couldn't wait to let loose. I've never been good at understanding why people do the things they do. Jared didn't have a computer, so the next morning I spent a good chunk of time on his phone. I finally got in touch with a lawyer in Reading who was more than willing to handle the divorce. When I mentioned Kara's name, he seemed to already be familiar with her situation. I guess word gets around fast in small towns, especially when the police are involved. He assured me that documenting her recent behavior wouldn't be difficult, which would make the divorce straightforward. I had to send him a money order for $2,000, which pretty much drained me, but Uncle Jared offered to help financially if needed. The lawyer even suggested we go after Kara for child support since she'd made more than me, though with her now being out of a job, that could complicate things. I reached out to the boys' school and found the staff sympathetic. It seemed like everyone in the district knew about Kara's escapades. They agreed to forward all of the school records and even copies of the boys' birth certificates without any fuss. I told the boys they could take some time off until everything was sorted out. The next few months went smoothly. Kara signed the divorce papers, though there was no child support involved. She had lost her teaching certification and had to find a new line of work. I don't know what job she ended up with, but I'm sure it wasn't as prestigious as being a teacher. All that was left was to wait for the divorce to be finalized. Ryan and Spencer adjusted well to their new school. They had a long walk to the bus stop every morning, but Jared and I refused to drive them, calling it a character-building exercise. Into every life, a little sunshine must fall, or so they say. I might have butchered that saying, but you get the point. My bit of sunshine came at the end of May. Jared sent me on a trip to Cloudcroft to deliver 2 horses to a buyer. It was about a 5-hour drive, so I left early in hopes of making it back the same day. That part didn't go as planned. Dropping off the horses was the easy part. What I didn't enjoy was hauling an empty trailer on the way back. It's always been a hassle. About 10 minutes outside of Alamogordo, I hit a roadblock. A truck carrying undocumented immigrants had overturned, and there were law enforcement officers and border patrol swarming the area. They were inspecting every vehicle, especially trailers. I never did figure out what happened, but by the time I made it through the inspection, I was desperate for a bathroom break. I pulled off the road near a billboard and finally relieved myself. That's when I realized I had an audience. I walked back to the truck and grabbed 2 bottles of water from the cooler. The older of the 2 girls took both bottles and handed one to a little girl who couldn't have been more than 4 years old. The older woman was in her late 20s, with long dark hair, heavy eyebrows, and a golden complexion. The little girl was practically her miniature. They both looked exhausted, dirty, hungry, and scared, so I didn't say much. Instead, I waved for them to follow me to the truck. I knew this was probably illegal, but I couldn't bring myself to care. They hesitated for a moment, but eventually made their way to the passenger door, the older one never taking her eyes off me. We drove for about an hour before I had to stop for gas. As I filled up the tank, I pointed out the restroom to them. They were quick, in and out of the ladies' room, before I was done with the pump. When I went inside to pay, I grabbed a couple of pre-made sandwiches and 2 Cokes. I was right. They were just as hungry as they had been thirsty. There was a Walmart supercenter in Las Vegas, New Mexico, so I decided to stop before hitting the interstate toward the pass. My 2 passengers stuck close by as we walked in. I approached the greeter and soon had a shopping assistant, an older woman who spoke Spanish. I briefly explained what I needed, and we headed straight to the children's department. In no time, we had picked out underwear, pants, shirts, and socks for the little girl. The older one, well, more of a young woman, took a bit longer. Then we swung by the shoe department and grabbed some comfy sneakers for both of them. Our last stop was the health and beauty section, where we picked up toothbrushes, combs, and some feminine products. The young woman seemed a bit shy about that last part, but she accepted them nonetheless. I thanked the Walmart lady for her help, and she surprised me with a hug. Definitely not the usual store policy. Still, the bill came in under $200, so I was happy. Given the long day, I decided to stop for the night. I figured the women could use a hot shower and a soft bed, and I sure could too. I got a room with 2 beds, set their new clothes on one, and gestured toward the shower before stepping out. I called Jared to let him know I'd be back later than planned, though I left out the part about my unexpected passengers. He would figure that out soon enough. I couldn't help but chuckle at the thought. Whether he liked it or not, he was about to have a cook and housekeeper. After an hour, I figured it was time to head back to the room. I picked up a full KFC meal for 3 on the way. When I returned, both women were clean and refreshed, looking a lot better than they had earlier. "My name is Felix," I said. The smile that earned me was worth every dollar I'd just spent at Walmart. "Brooke," she said, pointing to herself, and then to the little girl. "Ruby," she pointed at me again. "Felix." It felt like something straight out of an old Tarzan movie, and I couldn't help but laugh. Before long, all 3 of us were chuckling together. The chicken and sides didn't last long. We were all pretty hungry by then. Not much conversation followed, naturally. After the meal, I pointed to one bed, and they lay down while I stretched out on the other. I kept my clothes on and stayed on top of the bedspread, deciding to skip the shower. Brooke seemed comfortable with that, and they both slept in their new clothes. I wasn't sure if a restaurant would be the best idea, so breakfast the next morning was just a couple of McMuffins from the drive-thru. We made it back to the ranch before noon. Jared found the whole situation hilarious. The ranch house had plenty of rooms, so we had no problem getting Brooke and Ruby settled in. Jared spoke a bit of Spanish and quickly learned that Ruby was Brooke's daughter and that her husband had died. She was trying to make her way to her brother, who worked as a bricklayer in Alabama. After the truck they'd been riding in overturned, most people stayed behind, but Brooke decided to walk away from the accident. It turned out to be a smart choice. Jared made us lunch and told Brooke that from now on, she'd be in charge of cooking. She seemed pleased by that, and honestly, I was too. Jared wasn't the greatest cook. When the boys got home from school, they were happy to meet Brooke. After tasting the dinner she made, they were even happier. I didn't recognize half the dishes, but they were delicious. It looked like I'd be picking up some Spanish while helping her with English. Of course, her grammar might end up just as bad as mine. Brooke quickly settled into a routine, taking over the household chores like washing, cleaning, and cooking. Jared was more than happy to let her handle it. Her English improved steadily, and I finally understood where the term Spanglish came from. She mixed both languages together, but she was getting pretty good at making herself understood. Ruby, on the other hand, was picking up English even faster, thanks to spending so much time with the boys and the TV. Sometimes, she even had to explain things to her mother, which Brooke found amusing. It was a relief to see how well Ruby was doing, especially since she would be starting school the following year. The divorce from Kara was finalized, and a few days later, a couple of boxes showed up via UPS. They contained the boys' clothes and some personal items, including their original birth certificates. Not a single thing of mine was in there, and there wasn't any note or letter from Kara. While part of me was curious about how she was doing, I wasn't interested enough to reach out and ask. Brooke noticed how happy I seemed and asked Jared about it. After he explained in Spanish, she left the room with a big smile. I took that as a good sign. Brooke was finally able to call her brother, thanks to having his address and cell phone number. He was sorry they hadn't seen each other, but he was relieved to know she was okay. The phone call seemed to tie up some loose ends for her. The boys were getting really good with the horses. Once all the buildings were painted, we spent our time fixing up the place, tackling all the tasks Jared had never gotten around to. The ranch started looking less like a rundown cowboy hangout and more like a resort. Before long, people who boarded their horses with Jared began asking if they could stay at the ranch rather than at a motel in town. Since we had plenty of rooms, Brooke thought it would be a great idea, especially if she could get a share of the profits. She giggled when she said it, but Jared thought it was a solid plan. We could offer a room along with supper and breakfast with the ranch hands. Jared had to get a license and install fire monitors, but a month later, Brooke had her own bed and breakfast. A few weeks after that, a small article about the ranch appeared in the Santa Fe newspaper, and before we knew it, the Lazy J Ranch became a popular tourist spot. Jared even had to buy more horses to accommodate all the visitors. He also had to get a computer, which the boys set up in no time, thanks to satellite internet. Things slowed down during the winter, which gave Jared time to add an extension to the house, creating 4 more rooms. Brooke got herself a brand new Granite Chef cooker, and Ryan got his learner's permit. I spent my days painting, sanding, and working around the ranch, while Jared and the boys handled the horses. In the evenings, the boys worked on the ranch's website, and Spencer was already taking reservations for the spring. He also taught Ruby how to read, and we set up accounts with all the major credit card companies. Even during the slow season, we were so busy that we started worrying about how crazy the next year would be. Whenever she could, Brooke would sit with me. We didn't talk much, but it was nice having her close by. She always made sure I had coffee or whatever I happened to be drinking. Our communication was improving, but I was a slow learner, and I wasn't exactly the most socially adept. Ryan tried a few times to nudge me into being friendlier with Brooke, but I just couldn't manage it. It was right before Christmas when Brooke finally pushed me off the fence. "Felix, I think it's time for Ruby to have her own bed and her own room. Don't you agree?" "I think so. Yeah, that's a good idea. We should have done that sooner." "Good. I'm glad you see it that way. I'm going to move my things into your room today, but I need a dresser. Could you move the second dresser from Ruby's room into yours? It's too heavy for me." "Of course. But, Brooke, there's only one bed in my room." "That's okay. Don't worry, I don't take up much space." I couldn't help but be impressed by how much her English had improved. Part of me wondered if this conversation had been planned out by Jared or my boys. Either way, she'd made her point, and I couldn't help but feel flattered. I'd been so careful not to do anything that would make her feel uncomfortable or that would take advantage of her situation. I guess she had figured that out on her own. I'd love to tell you about the romantic gestures I made to win Brooke over, but the truth is, I think I fell for her the first day I saw her. I just hadn't been able to admit it, to her or to myself. It was a relief to know that she felt the same way, and had the courage to act on it when I couldn't. We got married on Christmas Day with just the family and a few close friends from the area. The next year brought great success to the Lazy J Ranch. We were fully booked for months, so much so that we had to turn people away. Brooke hired a young girl to help with the kitchen, and Ryan started to take an interest in her. It was nice to see him showing signs of growing up. Sadly, we lost Jared at the end of the summer. He left everything to Brooke and me, not just the ranch, but also over $1 million in mineral rights. The boys were thriving, and Ruby was growing up fast. Life, for us, was good. The cold rain drizzled as Kara walked out of the Golden Sweet Treats after another grueling midnight to 8 shift. Her hands ached from hours of placing candy eyes on chocolate Easter bunnies. She held her tote bag in one hand and her pay envelope in the other as she ducked into a small diner for breakfast. Once seated, she pulled a worn copy of Celebrity Digest from her bag, flipping automatically to page 48. She stirred her coffee slowly, her eyes drifting to the familiar photo of her youngest son, Spencer, helping Elena Marlowe onto a chestnut horse. On the next page was Felix, standing on the porch of their beautiful ranch house, Brooke beside him, posing with Sabrina Hayes. Kara read the article again, just like she did every week, even though she had memorized every word by now. After finishing the article, she tucked the magazine back into her tote and opened her pay envelope, carefully counting her earnings. In about 20 minutes, the thrift stores would open, and maybe today would be a lucky day. Even with the 16 red dresses she already owned, Kara always felt the urge to find another one. You could never have too many red dresses after all.